Please subscribe and press bell icon.
Call me Ishmael. Herman Melville, Moby-Dick.
The video is made by Lytton.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. As screaming comes across the sky. Thomas Pynchon, Gravity's Rainbow. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Leo Tolstoy, Anna Karenina. Reverend past Eve and Adams, from swerve of shore to bend of bay, brings us by Commodious vicus of recirculation back to Howth Castle and environs. James Joyce, Finnegans Wake. It was a bright cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. George Orwell, 1984. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity, it was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. I am an invisible man. Ralph Ellison, Invisible Man. The Miss Lonelyhearts of the New York Post-Dispatch sat at his desk and stared at a piece of white cardboard. Nathanael West, Miss Lonelyhearts. You don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. Mark Twain,
The video
Adventures
is
of
made
Huckleberry
by
Finn.
Light for Era.
Someone must have slandered Joseph K. for one morning without having done anything truly wrong. He was arrested. Franz Kafka, The Trial. The sun shone, having no alternative on the nothing new. Samuel Beckett, Murphy. Once upon a time and a very good time there was a Miko coming down along the road, and this Miko that was coming down along the road met a Nison's little boy named Baby Turku. James Joyce, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. This is the saddest story I have ever heard. Fort Madox Ford, the Good Soldier. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life, or whether that station will be held by anybody else, these pages must show. Charles Dickens, David Copperfield. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of leather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed.
The video
James
is made
Joyce,
by
Ulysses.
Light for Era.
It was a dark and stormy night. The rain fell in torrents, except at occasional intervals, when it was checked by a violent gust of wind which swept up the streets, rattling along the housetops, and fiercely agitating the scanty flame of the lamps that struggled against the darkness. Edward George Bulwer Lytton, Paul Clifford. It was a wrong number that started it, the telephone ringing 3 times in the dead of night, and the voice on the other end asking for someone he was not. Paul Auster, City of Glass. Through the fence, between the curling flower spaces, I could see them hitting. William Faulkner, The Sound and the Fury. 124 was spiteful. Toni Morrison, Beloved. Somewhere in La Mancha, in a place whose name I do not care to remember, a gentleman lived not long ago, one of those who has a lens and ancient shield on a shelf and keeps a skinny nag and a greyhound for racing. Miguel de Cervantes, Don Quixote. The sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel. William Gibson, Neuromancer. I am a sick man, I am a spiteful man. Fyodor Dostoyevsky, Notes from Underground. Where now? Who now? When now? Samuel Beckett, The Unnamable. Once an angry man dragged his father along the ground through his own orchard. Stop, cried the groaning old man at last. Stop, I did not drag my father beyond this tree. Gertrude Stein, The Making of Americans.
The video is made by
In a sense, I am Jacob Horner. John Barth, The End of the Road. Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself. Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway. All this happened, more or less. Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse 5. They shoot the white girl first. Toni Morrison, Paradise. For a long time I went to bed early. Marcel Proust, Swan's Way. Dr. Weiss, at 40, knew that her life had been ruined by literature. Anita Bruckner, The Debut. I was the shadow of the waxwing's lane slashed by the false azure in the window pane. Vladimir Nabokov, Pale Fire. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God. I had the story, bit by bit, from various people, and, as generally happens in such cases, each time it was a different story. Edith Wharton, Ethan Frome. There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. C.S. Lewis, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. He was an old man who fished alone in a skiff in the Gulf Stream, and he had gone 84 days now without taking a fish. Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. I was born twice, first as a baby girl, on a remarkably smoggless Detroit day in January of 1960, and then again as a teenage boy in an emergency room near Petoskey, Michigan, in August of 1974. Jeffrey Ugnides, Middlesex. Elmer Gantry was drunk.
The video is made by Light for Era.
Sinclair Lewis, Elmer Gantry. We started dying before the snow, and like the snow, we continued to fall. Louise Erdrich, Tracks. It was a pleasure to burn. Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. A story has no beginning or end. Arbitrarily, one chooses that moment of experience from which to look back or from which to look ahead. Graham Greene, The End of the Affair. Having placed in my mouth sufficient bread for 3 minutes chewing, I withdrew my powers of sensual perception and retired into the privacy of my mind, my eyes and face assuming a vacant and preoccupied expression. Flann O'Brien, at Swim Two Birds. Miss Brooke had that kind of beauty which seems to be thrown into relief by poor dress. George Eliot, Midna March. It was love at first sight. Joseph Heller, Catch-22. I have never begun a novel with more misgiving. W. Somerset Maugham, The Razor's Edge. The human race, to which so many of my readers belong, has been playing at children's games from the beginning, and will probably do it till the end, which is a nuisance for the few people who grow up. G.K. Chesterton, the Napoleon of Notting Hill. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since.
The video is made by
F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. You better not never tell nobody but God. Alice Walker, The Color Purple. To be born again, sang Gabriel Farisht tumbling from the heavens, first you have to die. Salman Rushdie, The Satanic Verses. It was a queer, sultry summer, the summer they electrocuted the Rosenbergs, and I didn't know what I was doing in New York. Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar. If I'm out of my mind, it's all right with me, thought Moses Herzog. Saul Bellow, Herzog. Granted, I am an inmate of a mental hospital. My keeper is watching me. He never lets me out of his sight. There's a peephole in the door, and my keeper's eye is a shade of brown that can never see through a blue eye type like me. Ginger Grass, The Tin Drum. She waited, Kate Croy, for her father to come in, but he kept her unconscionably, and there were moments at which she showed herself in the glass over the mantel, a face positively pale with the irritation that had brought her to the point of going away without sight of him.
The video is made by Light for Era.
In the late summer of that year we lived in a house in a village that looked across the river and the plain to the mountains. Ernest Hemingway, A Farewell to Arms. Take my camel, dear, said my Aunt Dot as she climbed down from this animal on her return from High Mass. Rose Macaulay, The Towers of Trebizond. He was an inch, perhaps two, under 6 feet, powerfully built, and he advanced straight at you with a slight stoop of the shoulders, head forward, and a fixed from under stare which made you think of a charging bull. Joseph Conrad, Lord Jim. The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. L.P. Hartley, The Go-Between. I write this sitting in the kitchen sink. Dodie Smith, One Capture the Castle. It was just noon that Sunday morning when the sheriff reached the jail with Lucas Beauchamp, though the whole town had known since the night before that Lucas had killed a white man. William
The video
Faulkner,
is made
Intruder in
by
the Dust.
Light for Era.
I am an American, Chicago-born, Chicago, that somber city, and go at things as I have taught myself, freestyle, and will make the record in my own way. First to knock, first admitted, sometimes an innocent knock, sometimes a not so innocent. Saul Bellow, The Adventures of Augie March. The towers of Zenith aspired above the morning mist, austere towers of steel and cement and limestone, sturdy as cliffs and delicate as silver rods. Sinclair Lewis, Babbitt. He was born with a gift of laughter and a sense that the world was mad. Raphael Sabatini, Scaramouche. In the town, there were 2 mutes and they were always together. Carson McCullers, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Time is not a line but a dimension, like the dimensions of space. Margaret Atwood, Cat's Eye. for there could be no doubt of his sex, though the fashion of the time did something to disguise it, was in the act of slicing at the head of a moor which swung from the rafters. Virginia Woolf, Orlando. The cold passed reluctantly from the earth, and the retiring fogs revealed an army stretched out on the hills, resting. Stephen Crane, The Red Badge of Courage. I first met Dean not long after my wife and I split up. I had just gotten over a serious illness that I won't bother to talk about, except it had something to do with the miserably weary split up and my feeling that everything was dead. On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Mother died today, or maybe yesterday, I can't be sure. The Stranger by Albert Camus.
Light, for era.
The play, for which Briney had designed the posters, programs and tickets, constructed the sales booth out of a folding screen tipped on its side, and lined the collection box in red crepe paper, was written in her 2-day tempest of composition, causing her to miss a breakfast and a lunch. Atonement by Ian McEwan. Everyone had always said that John would be a preacher when he grew up, just like his father. It had been said so often that John, without ever thinking about it, had come to believe it himself. Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. I was born in the city of Bombay, once upon a time. No, that won't do. There's no getting away from the date. I was born in Dr. Narlikar's nursing home on August 15, 1947. The time matters too. Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. Into the face of the young man who sat on the terrace of the Hotel Magnifique at Cannes there had crept a look of furtive shame. The shifty, hang-dog look which announces that an Englishman is about to talk French. The Luck of the Bodkins by P.G. Wodehouse. Quiet as it's kept, there were no marigolds in the fall of 1941. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. We slept in what had once been the gymnasium. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I lost an arm on my last trip home, my left arm. Kindred by Octavia Butler. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into an enormous insect. The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Robert Cohn was once middleweight boxing champion of Princeton. Do not think that I am very much impressed by that as a boxing title, but it meant a lot to Cohn. The video is made by
Light, for era.
Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, J.K. Rowling.
Please subscribe and press bell icon.